Russian President Vladimir Putin is being called a war criminal for what he's doing in Ukraine. But his actions in Eastern Europe are not new. More than a decade ago, Putin used Russia's military to attack civilian targets in Syria during their civil war in order to help Syria's president remain in power. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge has the first U.S. TV interview with an eyewitness to the alleged war crimes in Syria.
Syrian refugee Omar al-Shogri blends in with his fellow undergrads at Georgetown University, which is remarkable given this picture from 2015, after Omar spent 3 years in Syrian prisons where he says he was systematically tortured.
When I was in jail, I never thought I would make it out.
What does it mean to be living freely in the U.S.?
Just being here in the U.S., it just gives you a position of power and responsibility to help the people who are not where you are right now.
What is the benefit of your power if you don't use it for good?
Now an advocate for human rights, Omar's story begins a decade ago, when Syrian President Bashar al-Assad cracked down on the pro-democracy movement, locking up protesters by the thousands.
So how many times were you arrested?
In total, 7 times. The last time was 3 years in prison. Who is denied from saying the word freedom? It's the most beautiful word that you can say.
It's a dangerous word in Syria.
It is the most dangerous word you can say in Syria. Here you have like the cigarette burn.
Omar described physical and emotional torture, telling us the regime kept meticulous records of the prisoners who died around him.
I numbered hundreds of bodies, if not thousands of bodies.
How do you emotionally survive that?
This, human part of you disappears in order for you to survive.
And now a new Syrian witness has come forward who offers eyewitness details to atrocities in Syria. Earlier this month, on Capitol Hill, he shared his firsthand account of 2 mass graves where he says thousands of bodies were buried. This is his first U.S. television interview.
The regime is a tyrannical regime, and I fear for my family.
Because of ongoing security threats, we agreed to shield his identity. He's known only as the gravedigger.
Twice a week, multiple trailer trucks would come, and each truck would have upwards of 100 to 400 or more bodies.
That voice you're hearing is the gravedigger's translator, Moaz Mustafa, who runs an advocacy group, the Syrian Emergency Task Force.
They were tortured to death. You could see clearly the signs of torture on their bodies.
You're describing a system of mass murder.
Yes, absolutely. This was a systematic machinery of death.
The gravedigger pointed us to this site near the Syrian capital. These satellite images obtained by CBS News show its transformation from a barren field to a series of trenches.
Everything that was going on, the mass graves, were systematic and were part of what the Assad regime wanted to do.
Based on the gravedigger's account and other evidence, in a landmark decision last January, a German court found a former Syrian colonel guilty of crimes against humanity. CBS News has learned the gravedigger also met this month with officials from the White House and the State Department.
I just want to be clear. You heard conversations among Syrian intelligence officials about Americans dying in the Syrian prisons.
Yes, I heard Syrian regime officials discuss the fact that there were Americans that were killed, so yes, I did hear that.
The status of many missing Americans is unknown and the subject of further investigation. Among them, journalist Austin Tice, humanitarian aid worker Leila Shrakani, and psychologist Maj Kamalmaj.
Have you been talking to the FBI about missing Americans?
Of course, we talk to the FBI, we talk to other, war crimes committees in different countries, because I wanted to give my testimony because I expect myself to be killed at any day, right? I expect myself to be dead tomorrow.
Those threats are still that serious?
Of course.
Well, I think we have to recognize the critical role that Russia played in the crimes committed by the Assad regime.
Stephen Rapp is a former U.S. ambassador at large for war crimes. Rapp told us the current Russian targeting of civilians in Ukraine mirrors their years-long campaign in Syria.
When it looked like Assad was going to be overthrown by his own people, the Russians came all in and joined in the bombardment of hospitals and civilian neighborhoods.
The failure of the international community to hold the Syrian president responsible, Rapp told us, emboldened Putin.
You could kill your way out of it. And that's a lesson that that Russia's taken to heart, too, as it commits these crimes in Ukraine.
The gravedigger said he knows what the Russians are capable of.
I see the news coming out of Ukraine. My heart hurts because I know what Russia has done in Ukraine, what it can do, because I know what it's done in Syria.
The action the Assad regime have been taking undermines the international norms that we set in place in the aftermath of the Holocaust.
Naomi Kiekeler is the director of the Center for Prevention of Genocide at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington.
We are confronted by that question of, does the rhetoric of never again actually mean anything?
Does it mean something still?
I think a very serious reckoning that we need to be having today as an international community about that. As we see Syria continue to unfold now over a decade.
Omar will always be a torture survivor.
That's how I said, that's how I slept. I slept on my feet, right? So my feet would get really thick.
Showing us the crouch position his captors used to cripple him. And then there is that picture.
When I actually saw myself for the first time in the mirror, I was shocked. I saw a ghost because I could not accept how horrible I looked when I got out of prison. The blood coming from my eyes, from my nose, from my ears, everything looked so horrible, reflecting the brutality of the Syrian regime. I just want that to disappear.
If you look really closely, you see the smile.
I do. I always smile.
7 years after Omar's mother helped him escape, he reunited with his sister, threading the needle of despair to stitch together hope and purpose.
I can cry for 100,000 years for what I went through. It wouldn't even be enough, right? But I am going to tell everyone, to tell the story of the Syrian people through me.
For more on this, let's bring in Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle. He represents Pennsylvania's 2nd District. Congressman, welcome. Thanks for being with us. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was implicated by the UN for war crimes during the Syrian civil war. What does that mean in practice?
Well, unfortunately, it hasn't meant much thus far. The fact that Assad was able to get away with his many crimes, the fact that Putin was as well. I have long maintained, ever since this operation, this invasion began over a month ago in Ukraine, that had Putin and Assad not been successful in Syria over the course of the last decade, Putin joining the action halfway through, then you would not have seen the invasion that has taken place in Ukraine.
Yes, and in fact, Bashar al-Assad remains in power, albeit isolated, as Syria continues to be ripped apart in the ongoing civil war. What do you see as the best-case scenario for the people of Syria, and how do you think realistically that can happen?
So this war has been going on 11 years now. What initially may have started off or been characterized by some as a civil war is clearly no longer the case. In many ways, it's almost like a mini world war, because you have so many different actors who are playing on that battlefield. The reality is, though, and this is something that's a bit of a split within, I would say, the diplomatic community in the West. There are those who believe that we can reach an agreement with Assad and move on with him remaining in power. I firmly, with every fiber of my being, oppose that. We will never have a free and fair Syria with Assad still in power, period. We can never make that deal, whether it's the United States or any of us in the West.
The U.S. government has formally accused Russian forces of committing war crimes in Ukraine. What do you think that might mean for President Putin?
Well, it seems quite apparent that the evidence is there, but I have to say for myself, I'm a little less interested at the moment in sort of the legalese, and I'm more interested as a member of Congress in making sure the Ukrainians have everything at their disposal in order to fight off the Russian invaders. Because the best way we can defeat this, the best way we can achieve peace, is if we bog down Russia in a quagmire in Ukraine, and then and only then will Putin turn to a negotiated settlement when he realizes that occupying all of Ukraine is just impossible.
Well, Russia denies intentionally striking a building that was sheltering civilians in Mariupol, where satellite imagery clearly showed the word children written outside. We also know pregnant women and children who were in a maternity ward there were devastated by Russian attacks as well. What are the worst case scenarios you think the West needs to prepare for?
So let's be clear, Putin is lying. They did purposely target innocent civilians in Mariupol the same way they did in Aleppo. I've called the operation in Ukraine essentially operating out of the Aleppo playbook. There has not been one thing that we have seen over the last month in Ukraine that we did not already see Putin do in Syria. So none of this should be a surprise. I think Putin is capable of almost any sort of atrocity or horror, and the only thing that will convince him to pull back from that is when he recognizes that he will not be allowed to succeed.
What else would you like to see Congress or the Biden administration do? The president says sanctions will take some time, and to date, they obviously have not had any kind of deterrent effect on President Putin.
Well, sanctions are important. After all, we just basically erased 30 years of economic progress in Russia over the last 30 days. But the reality is, if there is a brutal dictator who is willing to absorb those sort of economic consequences for his people, then the reality is there is a limit to what sanctions alone can do. So I was one of the members of Congress who voted on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis for the $13.5 billion in assistance that's defensive, economic, and humanitarian assistance that we passed some weeks ago and is already now flowing to Ukraine. I think we need to do more, though. In my view, if we are not going to establish a no-fly zone, which I understand the arguments for, it would involve U.S. soldiers and U.S. planes firing upon Russian planes. So that would be a hot war that we would then be involved in. But if we're not going to do that for understandable reasons, we have to help the Ukrainians be able to control their own airspace, helping them identify where the threats are coming from in their airspace, making sure that they have the javelins and the stingers that they need, as well as, even though this got bogged down a few weeks ago, I still think the Polish planes going to Ukraine and the U.S. backfilling those planes is a sound idea that we should pursue.
All right, Congressman Brendan Boyle. Congressman, thanks very much for sharing your perspective with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.